colder than that, if that's imaginable. But it would be great to have those. Got lots of Torontos in there. Regina, Saskatchewan, -6 there. So yeah, relatively warm in out east. I'm sure it doesn't feel it. And so we're going to learn a bit about Business Link. Now, in most provinces, there are support networks for small business owners. And if you connect with me, I can definitely direct you to the organization in your province that provides the type of service that we provide for business owners here in Alberta. I know in BC, they have Small Business BC, and they have organizations in the Atlantic provinces too. And the great thing about us is we provide our services, the information, our coaching, our guidance at no cost to the entrepreneurs. So that's a kind of a differentiator for us. And I can go in here. Here in Alberta, we're funded by the Government of Alberta and the Government of Canada. And our organizations like us are funded by their provincial governments in various places. Our goal is to provide support services to help our businesses grow and help the Alberta economy grow as a result of that. And we've been doing this for 25 years. So lots of experience of dealing with business owners from the idea stage through to the established and even the succession stage. So really, we work with business owners right across that spectrum. And the type of thing that you can reach out to me for is one-to-one guidance and support. So if you need support with business planning, if you need to decide, okay, it's the point now where I've got some employees, I need to think about my marketing plan because I want to grow. That's the type of support that we definitely can provide, and our provincial equivalents provide as well. We can provide oftentimes referrals to information that we're not necessarily specialists on, so we can pass those on as well. We do lots of events like this. We have experts programs. We can connect you to the accountants and to the lawyers that you need to be successful. And like I say, we do sessions like this. And a great offering that we have is our market research. So if you're thinking about going into a particular sector, let's say you're looking for, a new industry to explore, we can provide market research data that would be very expensive to go and get and access yourself. And so that's sort of the full range of what we do. I've rushed through that, but our website, businesslink.ca, is a great starting point for anyone looking for those types of support and services. I love the fact that we've got these temperatures coming in here. I've not seen one which is a plus yet. So we've got Waterloo at -11 and Brampton at -14. If anyone is somewhere and the temperature is above 0, we all resent you. But it would be great to see those in there. Excellent. So let's get into the main part of the discussion today and this information. So I've used some examples that aren't necessarily taken directly from the IT industry. I've included some, but just so we're all on the same page, I've used things that we're all going to basically understand. Firstly, what is an employee? It sounds a pretty obvious thing, doesn't it? They work under the direction of an employer. They're hired, they have an employment contract, and they do work for that employer. The relationship is managed by employment law. And I've used the example of a teacher here. So a teacher, they're employed by the school board. Their work is managed by the principal. They have an employment contract. They're expected to be at work from this time to this time. It's what we all recognize pretty standard as an employee. Their relationship with their employer is governed by employment law and a contract. When we talk about an independent contractor or a contractor, and I'm going to use those words interchangeably because we have so many for them here, and here are some, like we have freelancer, we have consultants, we have contractors. So you might hear me or self-employed using any of those terms today. That relationship with the employer or the payer is different, and it's not based on an employment contract anymore. It's now based on a contract for service. And that's the big difference. So instead of that employment contract being very prescriptive about the times of day I would be expected to to be at work and the nature of that relationship, and I'm on payroll and I get a certain number of holidays a year, and that a contract for service actually is much more focused on the work that will be provided. So this is the work that you will do, and these are and this is how much you will be remunerated for it. But you don't fall under those same protections or those same rules that we would see for someone who is an employee. And really, I think we can highlight some key differences here. It's important to understand whether we are an employee or an independent contractor, because it has big implications for our tax. It has implications for EI, for our pension and things like that. So it's really important to understand, well, which am I? Which could I potentially be? So as that first thing that I've said already, one, there is an employment contract. It's governed by employment law in the province where we are. And when I'm freelance, they're employing me to do a certain service, a particular service. Again, the key difference here when it comes to pay, if I'm an employee, I can expect a regular paycheck at the end of the month, no matter what. That's how I'm paid. It's based on my salary. Whereas when I'm a freelancer, I'm unlikely to be paid in that way. They're not going to take deductions. They're not going to take tax off its source and all those things like that. I'm responsible to manage that. And it's possible that I will be paid maybe part of it at the start of a contract and part of it at the end of a contract or points in between, but I'm not going to be on payroll in the same way as if I was an employee. If I'm a employed IT technician, it's likely for lots of businesses I'm going to receive some benefits, health benefits, things like that. I'm not going to see that in the same way as if I'm a freelance. I'm going to be responsible for some of my own there. And there's benefits that I can go and get, but I'm getting them essentially as a small business owner. I'm going out and seeking those. It's not through my employer. And I mean, all of these things in and of themselves, it's not like, well, if the business provides, in this example, the IT equipment, therefore I am not an employee, therefore I am an employee. Some of them are, we take the balance, and an assessment has to be made. So if we are all on the things that are true of an employee side, we're an employee. But there are some things that, well, an assessment has to be made. Am I the majority in one camp or the other? And this is kind of important as well. When we're working for a single employer, or maybe two employers, like with a part-time job, it's likely that we are employed, we're an employee. If we have more than one source of revenue, it's more typical that we're an independent contractor. There is some clarity that I need to bring to that. You can be an independent contractor and work for a single organization, but it does have some implications when it comes to tax and when it comes to see how you're seen by the CRA. But I actually mention that more later on. These are just more sort of typical differences. And here we are. These are the sort of benchmarks that the CRA will use when determining, are you an employee or are you an independent contractor? So one is the control over the work and when it's done and how it's done. If the organization that is hiring you has a high level of control over that, they're saying, okay, it needs to be done exactly this time and in exactly this way, and you can't get your assistant to do it, you've got to do it. If that is the situation, it's likely that you are an employee. So if you don't have much control over how that work is delivered, how the service is delivered, it's likely you're an employee. Again, to that ownership of tools scenario, there are some exceptions for sure. But if you're going to your place of work and your equipment, your tools are provided for you, you don't have control, you can't leave with them, it's likely that you're in an employee situation there. Like I said, there is important differences there. In some industries, it's very standard for employees to actually have their own tools, like in the motor mechanic industry and things like that. And I don't know what it's like in IT. I'm sure it's different in that way. The big one is there a chance for a profit and a loss? And if through the way that I deliver the service, if there's potential for me to make a loss, it's a good chance that I'm a self-employed independent contractor, because I'm employed by BusinessLink. So no matter what happens, I can't make a loss. I get paid at the end of the day, and that's what happened. But if, as an independent contractor, I'm responsible for, if the situation occurs where the potential is for me to make a loss, that would indicate that I am an independent contractor. And finally, this question again, like, do you have more than a single client? Or are you at least free to work for more than a single client? If you aren't, you're probably employed. And that's very, very different, obviously, than the freedom that you would have as an independent contractor. The clue's in the title, isn't it? Am I independent to work for different organizations? So those are some key differences. If you are unsure, you can speak to an accountant. They're going to have a very, very clear idea of, okay, they know through their own experience whether people are employed or contractors. Or if you're still unsure at that stage, the CRA can give you an assessment. So you would the CRA has information on their website, and actually a process where you can go through with them and explain your situation, and they will give a determination as to whether you're an employee or if you're a contractor. Excellent. And when it comes to our income, that's going to be a big difference here. It's very straightforward. We all know for employees that we receive our wage, our salary, any other benefits, and that's our income. That's what we are then taxed on by the CRA in Canada. When I'm a contractor, the difference is I get to deduct business expenses because I have business expenses. My employer is no longer paying for my tools that I use, and no longer paying for the vehicle that I use to get in between their different job sites. So I now have expenses if I'm an independent contractor, and I can deduct those from the sales that I make. And that's the income now that is taxable, that I have to pay tax on. Crucial difference. Yeah, I get to deduct business expenses, and maybe I'm operating my business from my home. Maybe I'm operating my business from my home, and I would be able to deduct those expenses if I'm an independent contractor. If I'm an employee, I'm much more limited into how I can do that. I know that there are some deductions that can be made for home office workers there, but it's definitely not as broad as if you're an independent contractor. Okay, and then obviously it's nice to consider the money, and unfortunately it's not as all that straightforward. So do contractors earn more? Sometimes there's this sense that I'm going to make my millions, or I'm going to make a lot more money if I'm doing this as an independent contractor, but there are definitely other things to consider there. You're likely to have additional costs. There are going to be probably times when you have an uncertain period and maybe lose a contract. There's less certainty in that. The benefits, obviously, are we get to set our own schedule, and we can control more how and the type of work that we take on. We can specialize in areas that maybe we wouldn't be able to if we were an employee. And we're taxed in a different way. It allows us to be, it allows us to structure our operations in a slightly different way. So we're no longer necessarily, depends how we structure ourselves in our organization. I'll talk about this a bit more. We're no longer necessarily having to pay personal income tax on all the money that our operation business makes. There are different ways of structuring that. So that's to be considered. It's just a little bit more of a flexible tax situation. We still are responsible to pay tax. We still will pay tax, but we have a little bit more flexibility into how that's done. Okay, and so obviously independent contractors have got to plan and make plans for what happens if I don't get that work. Is it maybe easy for me to go back to an employment and I don't worry about it too much? But as an independent contractor or someone who's self-employed, you don't have the same access to employment insurance. So you're going to have to make some sort of personal plan to ensure that you're okay during those times. Again, when you're an independent contractor, no one's paying your CPP. So what's your retirement plan? Do you need to make sure you have additional pension plans? And there's something that, we're all aware of, the value of benefits. If we're an independent contractor, we're not going to be provided those by an employer. So we need to have some other plan around that. So absolutely, on the surface, it is probably the case that it will look like we earn more as an independent contractor, but we can expect to have more costs. And we just need to make sure we do that math before we price and before we move forward. It's important, obviously. Okay, and so here are some of the considerations that I think it's important to make before you start. And these are more those personal things. So I'm going to go through the legal steps that you need to take. We've thought about the considerations. Okay, what is an employee? What is an independent contractor? I'm hoping everyone has that now. But now let's think about this. Like, are we suited to being an independent contractor? Is it the case that, for some people, they like the certainty of being an employee. For their family reasons, they enjoy that certainty and that paycheck at the end of the month. They like turning up at 9 and leaving at 5. Perhaps as an independent contractor, that's not going to be how we are able to organize things. There's potentially a little more risk. We're not sort of covered by the risks that our business takes. We're taking those perhaps more personally. And with all businesses, there could be financial risk to that. We're going to probably invest some of our own money in equipment to get started, or to be able to market ourselves in some way, or even the financial risk of no longer having a salary. So start to consider those. Are you at a point in your life? Are you at a point in your family life where you want to take those financial risks? Obviously, with risk can come reward, but it's just being fully aware of the situation. And there's great tools. And this is one which I'm sure people are familiar with. It's a pretty standard SWOT analysis. But by recognizing, okay, what are my strengths? Why would I be suited to self-employment, to becoming an independent contractor? Do I have any weaknesses? And I would be honest, like, if I was running a business again, I would recognize that a weakness of mine was the day-to-day financial management. Even when it comes to doing my expenses for work, I find it a drag. I don't like doing it. So I recognize in me that would be my weakness. And just because that exists, it doesn't mean that we can't address it. We can't, get extra training, get some support, get some help, work with a partner. But it's important to identify those weaknesses. And then what are the opportunities? Why are we thinking about becoming an independent contractor in the first place? What do we see there in the market that we think we can do a better job of this by ourselves? What are those opportunities? And are there any threats that we see? Is this opportunity that we see short-lived, or is it a very, very competitive marketplace? What are those potential threats? So just by going through a process like this, and there's lots and lots of tools that you can use, it will give you a stronger starting point. You're going to go, okay, well, the strengths, I can play to those strengths, and I can choose a way of operating my business that makes the most of those strengths. And my weaknesses, I can look to address. My opportunities, I look to take advantage of. And the threats, I look to mitigate some of those things, whether it's through insurance or whether it's through partnering with other businesses, whatever those may be. But if we do that assessment, we can better plan for the future. Okay, and now I'm going to move on to some very, very practical things that if we're considering becoming an independent contractor, essentially we're starting our own small business. We might be the only employee at this time, but in Canada, really, there's no distinction. When I'm an independent contractor, I am my own business. I can be incorporated, I can be a sole proprietor, but I am my own business. So we need to do things like make sure we're financial tracking, back to that point of me talking about my weakness there. So everything that we expend to make income, so, use very obvious examples in your industry. If I buy a computer to be able to work with people and deliver my service, well, that is an expense I have made that I need to track, because come tax season, I'm going to make sure I want to write that off. And lots of other things that we may not immediately consider, if we're using our private vehicle for business, if we are using our home and have a home office, there are some deductions that we can make if we're an independent contractor, but we need to make sure that we are recording those as we go along through the year. And there's some great software now to be able to do all of this. Like I know Wave Apps is something that I've seen. And for most small business, independent contractor, it's free and it's easy. It's really quite simple to use, but there's QuickBooks and there's Xero. There's lots of things like that. But having a system in place from day one is going to definitely be to your advantage. On the other side of that, making sure we have a way to be able to invoice and track our sales and keep a good financial record of that. I make the suggestion to people who are thinking about this now is to perhaps set up a second bank account. Even if you're just keeping this as a very, very small thing, having a separate way of tracking those finances to your main bank account, I think it's just important to have that clarity. There's no law requiring that. It's not a legal requirement by any means, but it will help you keep track. Okay. And yeah, when it comes to thinking about our tax and our income, we sort of mentioned it on a previous slide, but I think it's good to reiterate. We take our sales, so what we've made through our contracts, we're able to deduct our expenses, and that profit, that part in between, is what we pay tax on. And if we're a sole proprietor, which I'll talk about a bit more about how to structure our independent contractor, but if we're a sole proprietor, we pay income tax on that profit that we make. And if we're a corporation, we pay corporation tax on the profit we make. And we pay income tax on money that we pay ourselves from the corporation. So it's likely we'll pay some personal income tax and there'll be some corporate tax too. But that's where it's a bit more flexible. We're given more options. But this, if I leave you with one thing, if you're considering this, make the investment in a working relationship with an accountant. Don't try and save $200 or $500 by not getting the accounting advice that will help you structure your business in a way that works for you. If you aren't in that position yet of being able to invest in working with an accountant, maybe you're not quite there yet in terms of being ready to go out into the world and being self-employed. When you're employed and you get your T4 and it's a very, very simple, easy process to do. I'm not saying that self-employed accounting is difficult to do, but by not getting the advice that you require, could leave you in a position where you're not really finding the benefits you would hope to find by being an independent contractor. I really encourage that. Speak to the experts in the way that as IT consultants, you don't want me to go in and try and solve this problem myself just by Googling something and hopefully I'll get to the bottom of it. I might get to the bottom of it, but it's probably going to take me 3 days and it will probably go wrong in the not too distant future. So by finding the advice you need is definitely a good start. This might be a good time. We've got a question here from Emmy. Sorry, Abiola. I said I would take questions. I said I'd wait till questions at the end, but this feels a good time for this one. While setting up your business account, should you use your name or your business name? Emmy, we are going to come to that. It sort of suits the next section well, and I'll definitely address that because I've got some more information about business name for sure. So here we are. These are the sort of the legal steps that we need to go through to run a business here in Canada. My experience is in Alberta. There's not huge differences in between the provinces in terms of this, but there's small differences. And so, feel free to reach out to me, even if you're not in Alberta. But the things that I'm speaking about will be more focused on Alberta, but it's not hugely different in place to place, for sure. So the big thing that you need to do is decide how are you going to be structured. I'm going to focus on 2 main structures in this presentation here. 1, sole proprietorship, and 2, corporation. The reason why I don't say partnership at this stage is I always urge that you speak to a professional if you are considering that. There's or corporation. There is complexity to partnerships, and there's increased risk and increased liability because there's more than one person going into that. And so I'm not going to focus too much on that. And for most people here, they'll be choosing between a sole proprietorship or a corporation. So the sole proprietorship, first of all, the advantages of this is it's very quick, cheap, and easy to set up. All of us here could, by the end of tomorrow, have set up our sole proprietorships if we want. And in fact, and this is to the naming point, if we just wanted to trade as our own name, so I just want to go and invoice my invoice a business as Matt Hill, I don't even need to set up a sole proprietorship. I can just go and operate in that way. I don't need to register a sole proprietorship if it is just my name that I'm trading under. If I want to go and call myself Matt Hill Consulting, I need to go and declare that trade name. And here in the province of Alberta, you go to the registry and you complete a declaration of trade name form. I looked for Ontario just before I joined this, and it's a similar process. It's, I want to say $47. It's within that range. It's relatively inexpensive to go and to do that. In Ontario, you have to renew that every 5 years, I noticed. I know you don't here. So like I say, it's small differences. So those are the advantages. It can be ideal if you're very, very small. The cons are we don't have any limits to our liability. The business is us. We are one and the same. And so if when I enter into a contract with someone, it's not the business entering into the contract with that person. It can't. It's not its own legal entity. I am entering into that contract with someone. So if the business in the business activity, there's an issue, I can be the one who's sued. I'm liable for the debts of the business, all those things. Another limitation of it is I can't bring on a partner. I can't sell shares in myself. And so that can be a problem in some cases. If I plan to expand or to grow or to move into other markets, if I'm a sole proprietor, I can't sell parts of that business to other people. So it can be harder to raise capital in that way. And back to the name issue, if I declare a trade name, it doesn't give me any name protection. So if I register Matt Hill Consulting, someone else can go along if they were desperate to and register the name Matt Hill Consulting. However, there is common law that protects us in that example. No one can come along and literally pretend to be me or impersonate me. So there is protection there, but the declaration of a trade name doesn't protect that trade name in and of itself. And so those are the outlines of a sole proprietorship. You're absolutely right. So Steve Ishola here, can I convert a sole proprietor registered in personal name to a business name? So again, this is a province by province difference. If here in Alberta, you would not need to register a sole proprietorship that's in your personal name. You would just operate as that. You could then I could then declare that trade name. So I'll use an example here. So if I started off and I've got a very small business and I design websites for people, and I just do it for like friends, family, businesses I know, and I'm just trading as Matt Hill, I don't need a declaration of trade name at that point. If I get a bit more serious and I decide to name my business White Owl Designs, I then can go and register that trade name. I can go and register 50 trade names if I want. Like if I'm desperate to do that, if I really want to trade as all those different stylings, I can go and do that. There's probably not much advantage to doing that. It's probably confusing, but if that was what I wanted to do, I could do that. You're not changing it from a personal name to a business name. You're just really registering the business name in addition. So that's obviously sole proprietorship. The other side of it, of this, is registering a corporation. And this is where we see advantages when it comes to tax. We can now raise capital because I can sell shares in my business. I want to bring on a partner who wants to open, a second office. I can sell him shares in the business. He can bring capital into it. It limits our personal liability. So now the business can enter into contracts. So when we go and lease our second office space, it is the business that's leasing that space. It's not the individual. The disadvantage is if we're very small, if we're not earning much money at this stage, let's use my web designer example again. If I'm making $600 a month, something like that, the costs of running a corporation and the extra accounting that will be required, it's going to wipe out my profits pretty quickly. And so there is definitely a point where, for tax efficiency reasons, I would want to become a corporation. And it does vary business to business. So again, it's having that conversation with your accountant early. What are your plans for this business? What are your family plans and your future plans? Do you want to bring a partner into there? By structuring right to begin with, you're probably going to save yourself future expense. And another big reason why people choose a corporation is to limit that risk, limit that personal liability. And unless you're very certain of what you're doing, how confident can you be that you are limiting that risk you set out to limit? So by getting that professional advice, I really, really urge that. One thing to note is that some workplaces, Abiola and I were talking about RBC, and it's very likely that a very large corporation like that will expect their contractors to have a corporation, to be set up in that way. Some government contracts, there will be an expectation that they're not dealing with a sole proprietor, that they want to set you up that they want you to set up as a corporation. And the next slide deals with this in a bit more detail. Just quickly onto that question of banking there. So another reason we would want to go back and do that as a sole proprietor, we may want to do a declaration of trade name if we're going to trade as something other than our name, is that we want to be able to invoice people and have a bank account in the name of the business. We don't just want our own in our personal name. So really, I think most banks would expect to see your declaration of trade name documents to be able to set you up a business account using a different name to your own. In most cases, I think that's what they would expect to see. Excellent. Okay, and this is important, and I think this will come up for people in your industry kind of specifically, other industries as well, but I think this may at times be an issue. So the government wants to make sure that people who are in fact employees, who have provide their service to a single business, aren't in fact pretending to be corporations. And so what they do is they have a personal service business category. And so if that is the case, I don't get basically the tax advantages of being a corporation. I can't deduct the same things. I don't get the small business tax credit. There are a number of things that essentially mean for tax purposes, even if I'm an incorporated employee, for tax purposes, in fact, I'm treated pretty much as an employee. And I don't get those same tax advantages. And it's to stop, let's say, use an example of, the vice chancellor of a university thinking, okay, I'm earning $250,000 a year here. Let's set up as a corporation. And so I can get all these tax advantages and pay corporation tax because it's taxed at 12% or whatever it is. It's to stop that situation occurring where in fact, you are an employee. You can't just set up a corporation, say you're a corporation, and then have those tax advantages of being a corporation, if in fact you are an employee. So it's something to bear in mind, and that definitely does come up. Okay. So is the person, I I don't know how new. It's not very, very new, but the personal service business is definitely something that I know the CRA are very conscious about this. You know, they don't want de facto employees not pretending to be businesses, but setting up as businesses. They're looking at ways of protecting it. So very possibly it is new. I've been in Canada for 3 years, and it's been here the whole time I've been here. So that's the timescale I know about. Thanks, Sam. Okay. And then, so once we have decided on our business structure and whether we're a sole proprietor or a corporation, whatever that we may be, we're going to have regulations that we need to be aware of and make sure that we're following. So in Canada, in Canada, we have federal regulations, provincial and municipal, and it varies business industry to industry as to how much these will affect us. So I will try and take an IT example through here. So the first thing is municipal regulations. So if we're running an IT business from our home, our municipality is going to want to know that we're doing that. They don't want people necessarily running large-scale businesses from their basement, or at least they're going to set some rules around that. So our municipality are going to set rules around the number of visitors, business-type visitors we can have come to our home. If we're going to have clients, they're going to set rules on parking or fire and security. So if you are planning on starting a business and having a home office, I really encourage you to connect with your city office or town hall, where it depends on where you are. Visit their website, because they're going to have information that's relevant just in your situation. I have an example a bit later on about how it can be very, very different municipality to municipality. But yeah, if you're planning on operating a business from your home, and by operating business, I mean, let's say we want to run a Shopify store where we sell mobile phone cases. Well, that's operating a business from our home, and our municipality would want to know and understand we were doing that. So that's to be aware of there. When it comes to provincial regulations, they manage our relationship with our employees. They look at things like consumer protection, occupational health and safety as well. So where I could see this fit in with us and the audience that we have here. Let's say I'm a contractor and I get to the size and the scale where I need to take on an employee to help me do some of this work. Well, it's at that provincial level where employment standards are set. And those are the rules that I need to be aware of. So minimum wage and number of days holiday and things like that that's set at a provincial level. So if I plan on having employees, that's something I need to be aware of there. And then federal regulations. I mean, I don't see these massively impacting the types of businesses that I think would be set up here, but oftentimes it's around consumer safety and mass-produced goods. If we're importing and exporting, we're going to have to be aware of the federal standards that are set for the product that we are importing, but they're set at a federal level. There's a great website called bizpal.ca. And basically, when you're starting a business, you go in and you explain the type of business that you're going to do. You answer a series of questions, essentially, and they provide you with the regulations and the rules and the licenses that you probably should get as that business owner. I say probably because it's not foolproof. Like they can provide almost too many that might not in fact be relevant to your business, but it's a good starting point. And back to this municipal point. So we just move on from the regulations now to more the point of business licenses. In some municipalities, so if we think about, so I use two examples here, Ottawa and Vancouver, and I just checked before I came on the presentation today. So if I'm an IT contractor working in the city of Ottawa, from my understanding, from the information available on their website, I don't have to get anything. I don't have to go to the city and get a business license. Their business license, they focus more on things like home services contractors. So if you're coming in and fixing the plumbing or things like that. Whereas Vancouver, if I'm operating a home business and if I'm operating as an independent contractor in Vancouver, I need a City of Vancouver business license. So again, worth checking with your municipality of where you plan to operate. Do you need their business license? Kind of important. Again, these don't tend to be hugely expensive. Particularly if you live in the municipality or where you're planning to operate, I think it was $100 for the City of Vancouver for the year. These aren't huge amounts, but it's important to know whether you need to get one for sure. Okay, and then back to tax. If we're going to be doing this, we've got to understand our obligations to tax. And this often comes in here. Do I need to pay GST? Do I need to charge GST? At what point do I need to register for GST? So we're going to talk briefly about that here. People seem to know this $30,000 mark, and it's true. So if I do $30,000 in revenue, so I invoice for $30,000, I need to make sure when I go above that, that's the threshold, that I register to collect and remit GST to the CRA. And that's an important threshold. For some businesses, they may make the decision. They may make the decision from day one to register for GST. And they do that for a variety of reasons. To maybe appear that they're a larger business, a larger operation. They don't want other businesses to think that they just do under $30,000 a year. And there can be advantages if if you're making large purchases at the start of your business. There could be advantages to registering for GST because you get to claim the GST back as well. So that's in terms of GST. Now, you need to register if you are at that level, or for any of these reasons, you may need to register for a business number with CRA. And that's where we quite often run into it first. So if people get to that level, or if they have employees, they're going to need to register with the CRA. For most of the people, so the situation where, let's say you've got your main job and you're just doing some contracting on the side, and let's say you make $20,000 a year, you don't need to notify the CRA of that until you do your tax return there. Like you don't have to tell them, oh, I'm going to be doing this. You just declare that income that you've made later on. But if you are going to be doing, and if you have the need for any of these things, so doing import or export, or obviously if you register as a corporation, you're going to have to get a business number from the CRA at an earlier stage. Super easy process to do. You can do it on their website. You can do it on the phone. The one thing I'm going to say with GST, though, is be very deliberate about when you register. Don't register sort of speculatively, like thinking, oh, well, yeah, I'm going to be that size. I'm going to be that scale. I'll do it now to get my paperwork organized. Because once you register for GST, you got to collect it and you've got to pay it. So make sure that you really know the moment. And again, it's probably a conversation with your accountant of when to register with the GST. And choose a payment interval that works for you. If you're a very small business doing, let's say, $40,000 a year in revenue, you don't want to be doing a GST return bi-weekly. You want to probably be doing that annually. And so make sure you manage it in a way that works for you. Okay. And this is it. In Alberta, it's 5%. I know that there's HST and PST elsewhere, and that's the amount that you need to make sure that you are collecting. And I think this kind of provides a bit of a breakdown, and I'm sure there'll be questions in the chat here that we can come back to. I can see one there, which we'll definitely come to at the end there. But this kind of breaks down that if we're set up as a sole proprietor, these are the taxes that we're responsible for: personal income tax and GST possibly. And in a corporation, I'm going to have to pay tax on the corporation's earnings. I'm going to pay personal income tax on the money that I get paid. And again, GST if we're over that $30,000 or we choose to register. I'm just going to take a glass of water. Excellent. So as the timing's pretty good here. So those are the legal steps. Those are the things that we need to do, that we are comfortable and have the peace of mind that we're legally operating our business here in Canada. That's different and to what we need to do to ensure that we're going to be successful when we start a business. And I did this presentation not long ago, and it was great because I had a lawyer there, and he said, like, this stuff, all those legal steps, we could do in a day. He said, come to me and we can sort those out. That's not the hard part of becoming an independent contractor or becoming self-employed. The hard part is how do we get customers and ensure that we're going to be successful? That's the challenging part, because doing the paperwork is not the business. This is the business. And so that's what we need to make that plan around. We need to treat this as a business. We need to see ourselves as no longer hoping that work comes in and things, but really getting organized, thinking, and the middle one here for me, it's so important. It's the one thing that is, I think, people leave to chance or hope it's going to work out for them, of like, how are we going to find customers? How are we going to find good customers? Because that's a big difference as well, isn't it? And we all know that. How are we going to find the types of customers that we would like? We need to have a plan around that. And for most small businesses, that's a marketing plan where they identify who their target client is, and they develop their service, they develop their offering to match the needs of that target client. But also, we're going to make sure we have a financial plan, that we have the cash flow to be able to sustain our business over time. Because it's great, it's fantastic thinking that, okay, 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, all these invoices are going to be paid. But if we don't have that cash flow to be able to sustain us during that period, we're not really setting ourselves up for success. So having a clear idea of the cash flow within our business, having a marketing plan, and also getting the support and the help with administration and managing your paperwork, that's the big difference for that employees and independent contractors have. That ability to manage their own work. Can they do that? How do they schedule jobs? That's where we need to have a plan. And I always think this is a great starting point. When we're thinking about an independent contractor, it's great to think, oh, well, I really want to be my own boss and I really want to start my own business. But great businesses solve problems for their customers. Like, that's what it comes down to. They solve problems for their customers. It's not a vanity project or I want a lifestyle that's a bit like this. I think great businesses look at a marketplace. They see customers with a problem and they look to profitably solve that problem. So here's some steps, identify who your customer is. Don't be for everyone. Like those businesses that try and target everyone, they end up just being very generalist. And when we're such generalists, it's hard to charge a premium for our service, for our offering. And as a small business, as a very small business, that's really, really hard, to try and meet everyone's needs. So decide, what is it that you're really, really good at? What can you do better than your competition? And focus in on that. Back to this point. How are you better than the alternatives? Because an alternative for many of the businesses that we're talking about here are going to be to take on an employee. So in what way does your business, you being an independent contractor, better meet the needs of the business than an employee? Have a communications plan, and how do you communicate to potential clients? What is your marketing strategy? How are they going to become aware of you? Are you good at doing cold outreach? Are you going to rely on your network? What's your sales and marketing process? You gotta think about that. How do I take people from awareness to becoming a client of mine, and having a process there? And from there, I'm kind of we're on schedule and on time here, which is nice. We're going to look at some of those next steps, things that we should perhaps do. And I think a great starting point is that assessment. That we looked at it before, that SWOT analysis. Assess whether this is a right if this is the right idea for you. Like I said, some people, it works great for them to be employees. They like it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm enjoying being an employee. I've been a business owner in the past. Right now, I love being an employee. It works for my family. I like that certainty. Will I be an employee forever? Absolutely not. But it works for me right now. Secondly, identify that unique value proposition, the thing that sets you apart from the competition, that makes you stand out in a crowded marketplace. And I mean, this is a tip for what it's worth. I think for employees, this is important too. Be the guy who people go to for something, and if you're going for an interview, it's have something that makes you different, that is your unique value proposition, because it's the thing that's going to make it easier to make a choice about you. And then once we've done that, once we've identified our unique value proposition, once we know who we want to serve, you got to do that market research. Go and speak to your potential clients. Organizations like ours, we can help you with the secondary market research, getting all the data and getting the population sizes and the income levels and all that. But really, it's going to be so beneficial for you to go and speak to your potential clients, your potential employers, and find out what are they looking for? How can we help you meet your needs? And then on from that is you got to develop some sort of business plan and build your support team. I've spoken lots about that. Having that accountant who you can work with, having for some people, it's going to be having a lawyer. Think about this. You're entering into contracts with people, agreements to provide this service. I would want to make sure that my lawyer has looked at those or at least reviewed the types of contracts that I'm providing. And in terms of the business plan, it's going to be different for lots of people. If, like I've said lots of times here, if it's a very small business that you're going to do on the side of your current employment, maybe you don't need this huge 40, 50-page business plan that you would take to a bank. But if you're thinking, okay, this is going to be something that's a bit bigger, I'm going to need facilities, I'm going to need equipment, and we'll maybe have employees here, you're probably going to need something of a more formal business plan. And again, your support team are going to help you with that. It's great to see. I mean, on this idea of a support team, I always talk about this, about having a network. And it's great to see so many people here, and there's clearly a strong network. There's no greater determinant of entrepreneurial success than size and strength of network. So, when we look at education level, when we look at access to capital, there is no greater determinant than size and strength of your network. So by building this network now, you're giving yourself such a huge advantage. I mean, that's not on the slide, but that's just definitely always my thought when I see this. It's just so good to see networks of professionals. Okay, and then next steps is we have some of those. I know that there are learning opportunities being organized with NIPCA, which is awesome, but there are also lots and lots of other opportunities there. I encourage you, even if you're starting the smallest business and considering becoming an independent contractor, there's an amazing tool, and it's called the Business Model Canvas. And it really helps you map out what your business could look like. And what you bring that's unique to your clients. And it helps you understand, well, what are the options for revenue? What are my major expenses going to be? Some people call it like a business plan on a page. It's not quite that. It helps you understand your business. I just think it's such a great tool. So definitely Google that. And then obviously connect. You can feel free to connect with me as a small business strategist here. Obviously, if you're not in Alberta, I will have to kind of refer you out to other places, but I'm more than happy to do that for sure. And then we return to our learning objectives. But Abiola, I think here probably, if we jump into some questions, or if people want to add questions in there, Toby's very politely raised his hand there. Thanks, Toby. I mean, I don't mind, Abiola, and you can kind of decide here if you would like people to unmute or ask questions, or we take them from the chat. I'll kind of leave that to you.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question.
Hi, Toby. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Matthew. First is thanks a lot. Thanks for coming on the call. Thanks for pouring out these detail of information. And, for individuals like me who are independent contractors, I have a couple of questions I would like to ask you.
Yeah.
First is, so I've got a small company, and I have two service contracts with some, like, two different companies. But then, like you mentioned, I don't want to be an employee. I think I like this line of business. But then I've been thinking of scaling, and I've been thinking of, okay, so at this level, at just two contracts, I think it still seems manageable, and I'm looking forward to probably a third and a fourth. And at that point, I'm thinking I might, start thinking differently. Maybe I need to then start, thinking of maybe employing one or two individuals. And what would be your advice to, for individuals like me that would like to scale or would like to transit from maybe being a third party to like a B2B? Transitioning from like a third party service client to like a B2B business.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Toby. I think that's a great question. One is, I would say, start thinking about your systems and your processes now and start documenting those. So what is it that you're doing in your business that obviously is making you popular and making people work for you? But have systems in place that if you weren't there for an extended amount of time, the business would carry on and people would know what to do. By having those systems, it makes the business less about what you as an individual bring to it. And therefore it makes it easy to bring people in. So that's definitely what I would consider. And then start small, and we've talked lots about independent contractors here. You could bring on an independent contractor in some way. Obviously you need to be careful that you're not just employing them as a straightforward employee if you're doing that, but there is nothing stopping you from starting in a very small way by bringing on an independent contractor and growing that way. But I think businesses that are going from owner operator to having employees can be definitely challenging because the business is about them, isn't it? When it's the owner operator, they bring the magic, they bring the thing people want. It's all about them. So we got to think about having systems for sure. So I would say that's a great starting point. And I'm happy to connect sort of off the call, but there are lots of there are great books and there's great resources to help you with that process. But I think a good starting point is just simply documenting what you're doing. When you're taking on a new client, what's the process there? When there's an issue with a client, what's the process there? But by documenting it, I think, probably gives a good starting point. Was there a second question, Toby? No.
I think Toby is fine.
I think Toby's fine. Thanks.
Oh, I couldn't unmute myself. I was going to say thanks.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Thanks, Toby.
Okay, we have Wally here has a question. Wally, can you?
Yes. Thank you very much, Matt. You've actually shed light on quite a number of things that I have been battling with. Although I'm not an independent employer, I'm not an independent contractor. I am an employee right now.
Yeah.
But I have some kind of business ideas that I plan to roll out personally on my own. And then I was just thinking, you mentioned something around HST, GST, remission and collection. You said yes, we have to, when you start making 30,000, you have to start collecting. But here's the thing: are you talking about 30,000 in revenue, or profit after tax, or after you deducted all your expenses, or you're talking about 30,000 revenue, right?
Yeah, that's it. 30,000 revenue. So that's something to be aware of. It's very easy, even if you're quite a small business, to run to $30,000 revenue. So it can happen sooner. But sure, it's revenue. It's nice to have a simple question.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Hi, Ola.
Yeah. Chris, can you unmute Ola, please?
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Ola.
Hi, everyone. Yep. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thanks.
My question is around the personal service businesses and independent contractors who are incorporated. How do we make that distinction? How does CRA make that distinction to determine, for example, an IT consultant consulting who has probably a single client, let's say one of the banks, TD, but he's just a contractor maybe for 1 year. Would that person be categorized as a personal service business? How do they make that distinction?
Thanks. Great question. So, do you know what? I'm going to share in the chat here an article from BDO, which talks about this exact example here. Because it gets pretty technical is my answer there, and how they make the distinction really is like based on a number of factors around the nature of that contract. So you can absolutely have a single employer, but it's just how it's structured, and it basically I think the case study in there perfectly sums it up, because it's even their IT example.
Thank you, Matt. I think it's many of us, we kind of fall within this category, considering the space that we work in. In most cases, most of us that are within the independent consulting or contracting space as IT consultants or IT contractors, we tend to have one major project that we're working on independently as a consultant or contractor, and we tend to find ourselves, in between. How is CRA going to class, this? Are we incorporated, going to be dealt with as an incorporation or as PSB? So I think it's this link you've provided would, make many of us really have that understanding of how things are being done here.
Yeah, and ultimately the assessment is going to be made by the CRA, and there will be a machination of different scenarios that will impact this. And so, again, by speaking to an accountant, because there may be a way of structuring the contract or developing that relationship that means that you don't fall into that category. Obviously, if you fall into the category and that is the way it is, well, that's the way it is. None of us here obviously want to get around paying tax, but we want to make sure that we are being efficient, and we're not paying tax that we really shouldn't be paying. But yeah, it is like such a minefield that I think that getting the necessary advice is true, and it's almost like a situation by situation development here. Like, it's literally case law, so cases are being brought to determine this as we go, and it's shaping as a result of it. But yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Ola, I'm sorry I can't give a more like black and white answer. I think I ducked the question there, but when unsure, speak to an expert.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Now we have a question in the chat from Onajite. If a corporation has made losses for 3 years consecutively, what's the implication? I know that there is a law around that. Probably you don't have to worry about it if you don't make profits for a certain number of years, but it's good to hear it from your own experience and how you've been able to advise people that falls within that.
So yeah, again, like there has to be an intention to make profit. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's the important thing that we are able to make a proof about. Like, we can't run a business. We're not running a business if we are continuing to make a loss and we don't intend to make profit. In terms of like whether it's 3 years, I don't think, and again, I would want to be absolutely certain, and I can come back to you on it, that there is like, it's hard and fast that if you've not made profit for 3 years, you're done. But yeah, like there has to be intention clearly to make a profit. And yeah, like, I mean, it would be interesting to look at that situation. Like after 3 years, why aren't we making a profit? The types of businesses that we're talking about.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
So the floor is open. Questions, comments, addition, experiences from those of us that are within the space that others can learn from as well. Kindly just indicate, and I'll, unmute you so you can have the floor.
Hi, Matt. Christopher here. So in a scenario where we're looking at, I mean, we saw what happened in 2020. Tons of folks like myself who were consultants and whatnot lost basically those jobs, right? And, prior years, we've always been giving CRA this, or CRA has been saying, oh, you made some profit here, we're going to deduct it, right? Now we're in this scenario where, yeah, I'm taking care of my own responses, pension, blah, blah, blah. How can I go to CRA this year and let them know that, okay, it's not the same for 2020. Am I getting any kick? Is there anything intentional in the government saying I'm going to get some kickbacks for whatever losses I suffered in 2020? Do you think that's something I could go to CRA with in regards to that? Because it's tax season already. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, look, how do I approach CRA for 2020? Because 2020 was in 2019 or 2018 or, all that profit I've made for the previous years.
So the loss that are you saying, I don't want to pry too much, but let's say, so if someone has made a loss this year, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for 2020. Yeah.
You can write that off against you can write that off. So you can carry that loss forward.
Okay.
And you can write that off. Oh, sorry. So that possibly is where we're talking about the 3 years. So you can write that loss off for up to 3 years. Sorry, on profits from previous years, or you can carry that loss forward. Yeah. So yeah, if you made a loss this year, and if you had, I don't know of your situation, if you're a sole proprietor and you made a loss as a sole proprietor and you had T4 income, like T4 income, you can write off that loss against that T4 income. You essentially lower your income there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So back to the 3-year question. I think that may have been, is that what we were perhaps talking about? That yeah, the losses we can carry back, we can carry them back for up to 3 years or forward for a number of years. I want to say 20 years, or it's a significant amount of time we can carry losses forward. Yeah. Question I missed. Yeah. Thanks, Christopher.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, Omar, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you. My question is, I had a sole proprietorship opened in Quebec, but then I changed province. Am I supposed to register all over again? And how does it work? And the second question is, as a sole proprietor, can I upgrade to incorporation, or I have to do a fresh registration? Thank you.
So thanks, Omar. The situation may be different in Ontario, Quebec. I don't think it is. So basically, yes, you will need to declare a new sole proprietorship in the province that you're now in, and so yeah, let's say like if I moved from Alberta here and I have a sole proprietorship here, you just go and set up my sole proprietorship in Ontario. Yeah, there's no way of really transferring my sole proprietorship from here to there. And the second question was, just remind me what your second question was. I forgot. Can anyone?
Okay. All right, thank you. The second question is there a possibility to upgrade from a sole proprietorship to incorporation, or is it a fresh registration?
Yeah, there's no basically it's just fresh. Like I think it's good to think of like when I am a sole proprietor, I'm just a single guy. You know, when I'm a partnership, I'm married. But when I'm a corporation is when, let's say, we have the baby and the corporation is the baby. Do you know what I mean? I'm creating something new completely. So I don't change from being the parent to being the baby, you know? So it's just something new that's created. So yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
No worries. It's a really bad example.
All right, Babatokwe, you can go.
Okay. Hi, Matt. Thanks for taking your time to have us this evening. So my question is this. If you run a business or if you have a corporation and you're using your basement as your office, okay?
Yeah.
And you're paying electricity, all the stuffs, and how do you divide or how do you estimate what costs towards your business and what costs towards your own apartment? Because my accountant told me that sometimes it's better for us to actually, pay those bills and maybe claim it back during the final year tax return and everything. But sometimes it can be very expensive if you have a mortgage and stuff and you're paying the mortgage from your company. Meanwhile, you own the mortgage. So those kind of scenarios, what's the best practice? That's the right question. What's the best practice to estimate the cost?
Are you set up as a corporation? Like,
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah.
So you, So I think your accountant's giving the advice that I would really is if you're literally running it from your basement at the end of the year, you would make that claim, you would deduct those expenses. Yeah, I don't see a way that you could do that throughout the year because you're not going to pay tax till the end. You're not going to be paying the tax till the end of the year. So,
do you get what I mean though? Like the basement is your company and you have to, obviously you could have gone out to maybe somewhere to rent a place physically and pay every month, but you decide to use your basement. So essentially I could say I'm renting out my business for my company, but because I own the company, it's kind of like conflict of interest because you could equally just say you're renting out the business for $2,000. Meanwhile, it's essentially maybe $500, the market price for the basement, right? So what's your opinion on that? And what's the best practice? Let's say that's the current situation you find.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, I think they would look at your individual circumstance. That makes things clear. And I think, it's hard, isn't it? Because what is the market rent of your basement as an office? Well, probably much lower than its value to you as an office. Do you know, like, I think it is one of those situations where you would work with your accountant to find the most efficient way, because for most people here, they're going to literally total up their expenses and, their housing expenses. And they'll say, okay, 1/8 of my housing expenses are related to my business, and that's the deduction that I make. But you, in effect, are renting your basement from yourself, which is fine to do, you're fine to do. And then that's the deduction you make at the end of your. I think your accountant should really be able to look at your personal financial situation, your business finances, and make the most efficient measure of that. Like, I don't think there is one thing that is the perfect thing to do and one that's not. I think it will be a case of, well, what's right for you in your individual situation.
Yeah. Just to help out, it recommends that I deassociate my company from the basement and stuff. So I shouldn't say I'm paying my basement. I'm literally working. And if I rented my a company outside of my own controlled environment, then they can associate the cost. However, if it's still attached to me, then I shouldn't. For audit purposes, you wouldn't want to conflict interest, and it makes things really harder, and it can be investigated if things get complex. So that was the recommendation.
Yeah, because it's not at arm's length, is it? Yeah, you're not. There's not sufficient distance from it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so if I might just chip in, I've found myself in such situation before, and just as Matt said, it's on a case-by-case basis, sort of. So the way my accountant approached it was, you found yourself in this situation, The best approach at that point in time was basically to know the size of your environment, be able to know the size you're using for your business, and the total is 100%. What is the percentage of that size you're using for business, and be able to document that. So it's all about documentation, so that if anything comes up down the line, you have something presentable to say, my whole apartment or my whole house is 2,000 square feet. I am currently using 750 square feet for my business, and that is the size of my basement. So this cost is associated to that.
And that's the most common way. Like, I think that's most commonly the way we would see it, for sure. Yeah.
Ebony Sisi, yes.
Hi, hello, Matt. This is Buki.
Hi, Buki.
Hi. So I just wanted to help with Babatokwe's question, and Abiola is right. So you're not supposed to be paying yourself rent, because that's what you're effectively doing. But even if you do that, your accountant will add everything back to the income, and they will use the size of the building. So like Abiola said, they would ask you questions about the size of your building and what percentage of it you actually use for business. For some people, they won't even qualify if you don't have a designated area. So for instance, if you work you don't have like a definite area, no library, no basement, nothing, and you can't really, maybe you work from your kitchen, and the accountant cannot really determine that you have a set-aside place for you to run the business, you may not be allowed to deduct that. But if they can decide it, they will apportion it on the total size of where you live, and then they will make that deduction. So if you've already gone and deducted rent that is over that amount, you're gonna find yourself with a tax bill at the end of the year.
Thanks, Buki.
Thank you, Buki. Wale, you have the floor.
Okay, Matt, I was just going to jump on the question that Omo asked earlier about when she was registered as a sole proprietor in Alberta, I think, and then she moved, and she's supposed to start all over again, like, setting up herself, registering again all over. So my question really is, what is the impact or the implication on that, when it comes to tax matters, right? Because that means she's going to close down a business like a sole proprietorship and starting off, or how is she going to link that aspect that she was running in Alberta with what she's starting up afresh again here in Ontario, for example? How is she going to link that together? Say, for example, she wants to carry over laws from the ones she incurred in Alberta. How is she going to do that?
So we're conflating a couple of different things. Yeah. So the CRA don't care really about about me declaring a sole proprietorship in Alberta. They probably don't even know, like it's literally that. Think about the declaration of trade name or registering a sole proprietorship. It's just me telling the province that I'm doing business as a different name to my own. That's essentially what a declaration of trade name is. It's so that I can't call myself 5 different things and no one can trace me. When it comes to doing my tax return with CRA, if I've earned my first $30,000 in Alberta and then I've moved to Ontario partway through the year, I just declare that. I'm not declaring my income is the sole proprietor, the Alberta sole proprietorship and the Ontario sole proprietorship. They're kind of just not connected. And the process of setting up a sole proprietorship, it's not this huge big thing. Like it's literally going to the registry and filling in a form and paying $50. It's kind of that. It's that, yeah. And for most of you guys, won't even do that because you don't need to, because you're going to be setting up independent contractor businesses where you're trading as your own name. So you won't even go and declare a sole proprietorship. You will just invoice people under, Wally Papulu. Like that'll be it, I bet bad pronunciation. That's why I said it quick.
Thank you, Mark. So let's be clear here. Is it for incorporation, you can have a federally incorporation, and for sole proprietorship, there's nothing like that?
So federal corporation's confusing as well.
Okay.
Yeah, because federal corporation, if I go and register federal corporation, Government of Canada, federal corporation, if I want to go and do business in BC, I need to do an extra provincial corporation in BC. And then if I then want to go and open an office in Ontario, I need to go and do an extra provincial corporation in Ontario too. So most people here, I'll say, so let's say you're in Ontario now and you never plan on operating a business in Saskatchewan or BC, you're not going to become federally incorporated. There's just extra paperwork, extra time, extra money that's just not probably necessary in your situation, your circumstance. The benefit of federal corporation is it provides name protection across Canada. But in reality, you're just, for most people here, they're not going to necessarily need that. People see federal corporation. In fact, to become federally incorporated is cheaper than becoming provincially incorporated. And people think, well, that's strange. But no, it's like, if I'm becoming federally incorporated, I need to become provincially incorporated or extra provincially incorporated in all those provinces where I plan to carry on business. So if you're just going to operate in Ontario, your accountant is probably going to advise you just to do a provincial corporation in Ontario.
Now, if I'm to speak to many of us here, there are instances where even though we are registered in Ontario, for example, we get projects outside of Ontario.
Yeah.
Where does that, fall into it when it comes to when we are declaring taxes and things like that?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So it's where we carry on business. And the nature of the world now, like, bear in mind that this legislation kind of predates how we operate today, doesn't it? If we think that the idea of me being here in Alberta and delivering services to someone in Nova Scotia, even 30 years ago, was pretty crazy. Like we didn't have systems to set that up. So, let's use an example. We have to pay there's so much to consider here. So you're in Ontario and you're delivering a service to someone in BC. You don't have to go and set up a BC corporation. If you go set an office up in BC and go and advertise in BC, you need to then set up an extra provincial corporation in BC, but you don't need to. However, you need to charge that BC client the GST and the PST or HST, whichever is chargeable in British Columbia. You don't charge the Ontario rate, you charge the British Columbia rate. But that's yeah. Okay. All good invoicing software would do that and would kind of help you through that process. But yeah, you don't need to set up every place where you get a contract. Yeah. If you're physically going there, spending an amount of time there, advertising there, that's where it can get a bit more questionable. Like if you were going somewhere for 3 months and being on site and things like that, maybe there was, but yeah, for most people here, no.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
I like that question.
Do we have any other question? Any other person, any comments? Not seeing any hand up, no question in the chat. Is it safe to say we can release Matt? Questions? Okay, Akintunde, 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Matt. So you just made mention of having a business here in Ontario, and then you're doing a trade, or you're doing a business or a project in another province. How do you remit? And you said you have to charge the HST percentage of wherever you're doing the business. Now, how do you remit that in terms of tax when you're paying the CRA, the HST, and stuff like that? How do you remit that?
So it depends upon how you, not how you want to, but if you're a very, very small supplier, you'll just do that annually. And, you know, because it's such a small amount. But for some larger businesses, they would want to do that on a much, much more regular basis. But they just do that through their, you know, their CRA My Business account. And it's going to, you know, you're going to submit what you've collected. You're going to submit what you've collected and do it through that platform. Yeah. Once you're registered for GST, you don't need to register in each individual province. You're just registering for GST and collecting and remitting that when you do your return.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Akintunde? Or you're mute again? Sorry. All right.
Yes, I was made again. Thanks. Well, that does answer the question. But I was thinking in another realm. I don't know if this factors into this situation. Take, for instance, someone doing an Uber business, and you made mention that the person who is not making as much as 30 grand in a year, and do you necessarily have to register for the GST, HST, and then do you still remit it?
For an Uber driver?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that's really tough. I'm going to be honest, I don't know in that, because I don't know what their contract is like. I don't know whether they're charging people directly or does Uber charge them. Like it is just too complicated a scenario. I know that they have special rules around that type of worker. Like I know CRA does, and even province by province they do. But I don't know for an Uber driver. My guess is it would all be managed directly through the app, and that Uber would be doing that on behalf of their drivers. But to say I was certain on that, I wouldn't. My feeling is I don't think that Uber drivers are registering GST accounts and remitting GST, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
Okay, Matt. We have a question that, what would be your best advice for someone looking to transition from an employee to an independent consultant or contractor? Should one be looking at running both right now? As you're doing your 9 to 5, you are, keeping an eye on the other side till you get to that point that, you feel you're right. Maybe I'm answering the question already, but,
Well, no, and I think that's a great question. And I think it is so dependent on your personal situation. Like, so I'm going to use my own example here. So I was a teacher and I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. Like I'd done that part of my life, and I wanted to start a business, and it wouldn't have worked for me to be a teacher with the responsibilities and the time that I had and run my business. I had to make the idea to do a clean switch in that situation. in another situation, so let's say now that I talked about Matt Hill web design before. If I wanted to start that business, I could probably start that on the side of what I'm doing now. I could grow it as I came, as I went through things. But it is, I suppose, it's about your personal motivation and how you organize yourself as well. It's kind of knowing yourself. Like, are you going to? Because the employment can at times be a bit of a safety net, can't it? And it can stop us going for things. Whereas sometimes having that like danger of like, okay, how am I going to pay my rent this month, makes us go out and grow our business and make things happen. But I'm not advising that to anyone who doesn't, who that's going to cause major problems for. So I suppose it just depends where you are in your life, really. Good question, though.
Okay.
Sorry, just as I was doing that, I just had a look up for the income tax and the remittance for Uber drivers, just out of interest. And it does vary province by the look of it. So in some cases, they return the GST to the driver, and the driver has to remit it as an individual. It varies, but there is a whole page on their website all about it. So I know it's complex, because again, it's evolving, isn't it? Like, we didn't have that type of employee 15 years ago. So it is definitely an evolving situation. And I think the CRA and central tax offices are probably slower than high-tech internet companies to evolve.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. Well, thanks for inviting me. And it's just been it's just been really enjoyable to speak to this large group and to have great questions. And like, Christopher says, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. My email address, it couldn't be simpler, is just matt@businesslink.ca.
So much, Matt. I think it's if we give more room, we'll continue like this till it's 10 o'clock here in Ontario.
I know.
So thank you once again, Matt. We really appreciate this opportunity. I'll give it over to Buki to help us close this up.
Okay, thank you, Abiola. Matt, thank you so much. I think that's really what we can say. You've blown our minds. I'm sure everyone here today has learned one thing or the other. And the dream, the vision that NIPCA has is that we don't only be employees, we actually become big business owners everywhere in Canada. And hopefully we get to see a lot of our members becoming that. And we know we've got your support as Business Link. Thank you for that. And our members in Alberta definitely will be taking the benefit of having your business coaching. And I know you've offered to also give us other classes on other subjects. So we would definitely be reaching out to you. So please convey our deep gratitude to the entire organization and to all the ladies, Audrey, Yoyi. We are very grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Bucky. Thank you for organizing. I know it's a lot of work, and I just admire what you're all doing for your community. And like I say, I think the stronger our networks are, the stronger we are as entrepreneurs and future big business owners. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Matt. Have a good one.